Gather round, dads, it's time for a tale. Hand me a book and a warm pint of ale. Let's discuss writing and the literary gods with Dan Roberts on the Dadlit Pod.
Welcome to a special book club edition of the Dadlit Pod. I'm your host, Dan Roberts. I'm joined by Thomas Trang, author of Dark Neon and Dirt, a thriller from publisher Shotgun Honey, and the subject of a previous episode of the Dadlit Pod. Today he joins me as we discuss Where When It Rains, a literary novel by John Duffy, another former guest of the Dadlit Pod. You can find Where When It Rains over at Picket Fire Press or on Amazon. Where When It Rains is the story of Riley, a professional skateboarder who hits his head and is woken from a coma with crippling vertigo. Trapped in Phoenix and hoping to pursue his passion from behind the lens, he accidentally lands in the orbit of a narcissistic model, where he is captured by the glitz of parties, drug, and sex. His new friends are equally without direction, and together they drift from night to night in an alcohol-fueled hunt for meaning. When chance offers him a shot at real love and a real life, Riley must find a way to escape not only the force of his routines, but the pull of world events that seem intent on destroying him. Tom is one of two people who I introduced this book to that has come back to tell me they really like it. And so I thought that under the circumstance, Tom and I would sit down and have a book club discussion about Where When It Rains.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I loved it. I mean, I discovered it through the podcast. I was listening to the episode with John. Is it John F. Duffy or John Duffy or?
I think it's John F. Duffy.
Yeah,
But I want to point out this is the first book that I've confirmed the Dadlit Pod has sold. We've sold one book. Yes.
Well, that's how it starts. Yeah. No, yeah. John F. I do have it written down here. John F. Duffy. I mean, the F stands for fuck me. This guy can write because it was really something. And I was listening to the podcast as I do, and just listening to him talk and his background and the whole concept behind Picket Fire Press, I thought, you know what? I just like the cut of this guy's jib. Do people say that anymore?
Yes, I say that all the time. Yes,
yeah,
and I would agree.
Thing, I suppose. Yeah.
It's
no,
a dad
he just
thing.
seemed like really cool. The stuff he was talking about, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna. Sometimes you just get a good vibe from people, so I thought, I'm gonna check this book out. And yeah, I thought, it's probably going to be pretty good, but it was fucking amazing, and it's not actually. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't have thought it's necessarily the type of book I was into, given the subject matter. But just the writing really sold it. From the first page, the descriptions, the way that he manipulates time, which is really only something you can do in a novel.
Yeah,
I think because I actually reread it again, well, parts of it, certainly the intro chapters, just to get a feel for it again yesterday. And I forgot the way it starts. I thought it was a fairly linear start, and I remembered at the end there's sort of more sort of manipulation of time, but actually it starts not in media res, but it sort of starts, then goes back to the beginning, and there's it's very clever the way he's done it, and it's something that you can't really do in any other medium, as far as I'm aware, because I think the example I always use is, you could have a line in a book like, "Oh, every morning for 20 years, Dan Roberts woke up and smoked a cigarette."
Yeah,
and I mean, you could have someone say that in a voiceover on TV or on film, but it's not the same thing. It would, and if you tried to show it in some sort of way on the screen, yeah, you could do it, but it would be clumsy, and it wouldn't really work. And there's just points in the book where he really nails that kind of, you're in the moment, and then you're sort of jumping back and looking back at the moment, and yeah, it's really clever. Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess I was trying to describe it to someone. Um, I guess you'd call it literary fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I said this to someone recently. I read a lot of, I guess, what is called literary fiction, but I got to be honest, I'm not quite sure what that means. It's a bit like a delicious meal, or it's, I don't know
I
what.
think the I think that literary fiction in this context is almost a greater emphasis on the beauty and poetry of prose
Hmm,
versus necessarily the um, the clarity of description, right? There's a literary way to describe a sunset, and then there's a sort of standard way to describe a sunset. And I
yeah,
think
yeah. I mean,
it yeah,
yeah, no, I get that. I'm just it. I don't know. There's something about it that irks me, I guess, because it seems to sort of say, well, this is literary, and something like a crime novel or a science fiction novel just is
yeah,
not. I said,
yeah,
well, no, you could have a genre novel that's written, in a beautiful poetic way. And I think a lot of literary fiction, in a way, it is its own genre because a lot of it can be quite static in terms of, is there a plot? What's actually happening in this book other than someone sort of musing about the world, or whatever the case may be. But I think this book, Where When It Rains, it does have that literary quality, but then the way he structured it is that it sort of builds up to the midway point, and it just builds and builds and builds, and then I won't spoil it, but if things happen, and then it's almost like, well, he's just built it up to knock it down, and the second half of the book is just everything, the decisions that are made in the first half of the book, just the karmic bill is due, and just and it sort of picks up in intensity in terms of the plot, and it really races along. Like, yeah, by the second half of the book, I was reading it like a thriller.
mm.
Um, and
Well,
yeah, it's
yeah, I have thoughts about that. I've thought about it because I was sitting to think about it. And the title of the book is Where When It Rains, and
mm,
the completion of that is it pours. Uh, so to
ah,
me, when I thought about the center of the book where it transitions, where the sins sort of come back to haunt all the characters, is in the middle of a rainstorm. And typically, when a character is sort of dunked in a literary sense or soaked in water, they are reborn, right? There's a
right, yeah,
baptismal element to
yeah,
it. In this case, though, I actually read it as a flood wiping out Sodom and Gomorrah, yeah, a
yeah. I
Noah
could see that
style
too. Yeah,
flood,
yeah.
um, which I was thinking about today, reflecting upon the book and the sort of the accumulated sins where when the rain starts falling, everything comes back because the characters are not necessarily caked in their sins. And I'm not going to say that, the thing that comes to mind is like when it starts raining in the desert, like the small animals are forced to flee and hide.
Mm, mm,
And they can't go underground because they're going to get flooded out from underground burrows, so they have to go for higher ground. And it felt very sort of biblical. And I was interested in that when I thought about it again, because of course the beautiful woman is kind of in a form of idol worship, right?
yes, yeah, yeah.
And particularly I was thinking about the character Riley has a cute girlfriend who suffers some scarring on her face
Mm,
from at one point. That's the character that he aspires to be with. And
yeah,
he goes up on a mountain with her to her uncle's house. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
want to say her uncle's name is Abraham,
I
but I
can't.
might be wrong about that. I might be wrong about that. And and I read that as sort of a biblical
Mm,
analogy, a sort of like he's living in kind of a state of kind of like perpetual unmoving sinfulness.
yeah,
He's uncentered, and everyone around him is like bacchanalian and irresponsible and self-indulgent and sort of very pleasure driven and completely incapable and completely unwilling or unwanting to step away from that. And then he goes up on this mountain with this girl's uncle
mm,
and decides, oh, this is what I want to do. This is the person I want to be with.
yes, yeah,
I want to
yeah.
leave.
That's a crucial scene in the book. I remember that.
And then, I won't, I'm just going to say he doesn't.
Yeah,
He doesn't.
yeah. I didn't realize how hard it would be to discuss this without really getting into
I
big
think
spoiler
I think we'll
territory.
be
But
fine. The book has so many sort of interesting elements and so many layers. And
mm,
you and I went and exchanged on this over email a couple times,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
there are a lot of layers. I just think that one of those layers is sort of this like biblical I wouldn't say it's not really analogy, but it's the story of the wiping out of the earth
mm,
and Noah's Ark in this from the perspective of the people who were on the ground when the flood came.
right.
Uh, and I think that struck me. It thinking about it again. But you and I talked about it
Yeah, you're a lot
because
cleverer than I am because one thing I did want to bring up was the title, "Where When It Rains,"
yeah.
and I read the book, I loved it, and I thought about the title a few times, and I wasn't sure where it fit. I was like, is that a phrase that's in the book? And then I was just like, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like, what's Reservoir Dogs mean? Like, who cares?
No one, no one
Yeah.
knows.
Um, but yeah, you're right about the sort of bacchanalian element. Because one thing I sort of really, I wouldn't, not frustrated me, or maybe it frustrated me, and which is not to say I didn't enjoy it, but sometimes when you sort of get pulled into a book, characters and the decisions they make can frustrate you because
Yeah,
the character Riley, and this isn't a spoiler, he basically is a skateboarder. He has a bad accident, wakes up in Phoenix, Arizona, after 6 days in a coma. And then he kind of just falls into this new life in Phoenix. He wanders into a bar. He meets this guy, Colin. He gets a job at the bar. And one thing leads to another, and he finds himself in this new world. And it's just this passive, like he's a passenger almost in his own life, and he's just going along
yeah,
with this thing, and life's happening to him. Um, which I guess is a lot of guys, especially guys in their 20s, will will go through life like that, at least for a certain period of time. And you're just thinking, the sort of this life that they lead, it's so transparently shallow, and you just think, my God, are these people ever going to do anything remotely constructive with their lives? and uh, and then, but then there are hints that, this, and I think if people were going to sort of criticize the book, they'd just say, oh, this book is just endless debauchery. These characters are horrible. The guys are horrible. The women in the book, and that's all true. But well, I don't want to say that because it makes it sound like it's a misogynistic book, and it really isn't. I mean, I think
No, it's
everyone's
not
horrible to each
misogynistic
other.
at all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that's just the world and the characters of the book.
Well,
I mentioned
there's addiction and sort of delusions of perpetual youth, right?
Mm,
That it's the party's always there, so it never stops and it never will stop, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a line in the book. I wish I'd written it down, where it's something to the effect of, I like it here because people only ever ask me what I'm doing tonight. They don't ask me what I'm doing for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Something maybe it's the other way around, but
Yeah.
it's that being in that sort of moment, in the present moment, and not thinking about tomorrow, not even thinking about yesterday,
Yeah.
just the now. And I mentioned Hemingway before we started recording because the sort of proto Instagram influencer model character, Ashley, I'm convinced is a tip of the hat to Brett Ashley from The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway, which is, I mean, you look at this book and you can kind of see the DNA of things like Gatsby,
Yeah.
Hemingway, Sun Also Rises, which is just about the lost generation in the 1920s, just bumbling around Paris and Spain and aimlessly drinking, fighting and fucking and all the rest of it. But yeah, he sort of updated it to this not even quite modern world, and that's another interesting about the book is the setting. It's a very specific time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of MySpace stuff in there. And it's funny because this came up recently in my day job in the office. We just had this wave of young guys, interns, some client's kid, whatever, and they come and sit with us for a week. And we've had one guy who's coming up to 12 months. He's 21, I want to say. He doesn't know anything. He'd never heard of U2. He'd never heard of someone else. Had never heard of Phil Collins. I mean, God bless him. And he'd never heard of MySpace. A couple of us were just joking about, MySpace. We had to try and explain to him what MySpace was. I said, well, do you know what Facebook is? He's just like, yeah. He's probably like, yeah, that's something my parents do. So, well, MySpace was Facebook before Facebook was Facebook. But yeah, and the other thing, it's really pre-iPhone as well, because the whole conceit of this guy who's got a camera can go and take photos at parties, and that's like his carte blanche into this world. That just wouldn't happen anymore because everyone's got a camera,
yeah,
on their phone. So yeah, it's very interesting, and then it sort of ties into the 2008 subprime thing. And that's something else that came up in the office just the other day. Actually, I had some 16-year-old kid sitting with me for the afternoon. I was showing him something, and he's like, "Oh, we're looking at a chart of numbers." And he's like, "What happened there?" I said, "Oh, that was 2008. That's why it's moving down very sharply." He said, "What happened?" He said, "What happened in 2008?" I said, "Do you know what the subprime mortgage crisis was?" He said, "No." He said, "I wasn't even born then." It really made me feel old. But yeah, this book is set. I think it 2006, 2007.
Yeah, it's right before.
It sets it up in the book because obviously he comes out of a coma, and they say, do you know where you are? Do you know what year it is? Which is, which is handy.
Yeah.
But it's really, and you don't sort of think about it when you're reading it, but it's one of those books that you finish it and close it, and it sort of just sticks in your mind. And you start sort of playing scenes over and thinking about the kind of the themes of the book. And yeah, you couldn't have really set this book in any other time because it wouldn't work given the mechanics of the story. And I guess, if he's in his early 20s then, that would put him in his mid 40s or so now.
Yes.
So I
Well,
guess
yeah,
it's kind of that
he's
sweet spot for dad lit in a
well,
way.
that's where this is the thing that I really liked about it was that basically the book described everybody's 20s.
Mm,
A lot of people's 20s. In
yeah,
fact,
I
the other
think.
guy I sent it to, well, some of us were grinding it out trying to make it professionally. And so we weren't
Yeah,
exactly drinking every night, but we were
yeah,
drinking a fair amount. My friend who I sent it to, I said, this just seems like our 20s
yeah,
to
yeah.
me. But there's another thing to it, which is that um it's everybody's 20s, but it's very particularly our 20s, right? Because
Mm,
there's this new idea of MySpace.
yeah.
And this was back before cell phones could send pictures to people and before particularly young men regressed or have regressed into like the constancy of video gaming and those
Mm,
sorts of things. That was back when dudes were still out going to
touching
party.
grass. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
We're still going to parties and as this character does, getting high and trying to get laid.
yeah.
And so it's almost it's almost a very particular moment in that regard. And I just thought that was interesting when I thought about who this book would be relevant to now,
Mm,
and I thought about the MySpace thing and I thought about the model, the suicide girl who gets on the
yes, yeah,
suicide girl website. And that was also back when women did not have tattoos. I don't think
yeah.
people realize this, but in circa 2008, women didn't have tattoos. And now women, particularly in the United States, get the majority of tattoos. Back then, it was relatively scarce.
Mm,
Now, what, 18 years ago, for
yeah,
women to have tattoos. It was so unique that there was like a specific website if that's what you were interested in.
yeah. The Suicide Girls thing's very kind of mid noughties, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
yeah. It was yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but I don't have any tattoos. I
No, neither
never.
do I.
Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
attention seeker with my not having tattoos these days because it seems like I'm the outlier. But
Well, tattoos, I'm intrigued by tattoos because I have no desire to get one. And I often
mm,
and tattoos, I'm told by the people who get them, are a very personal thing and you're not supposed to ask about them.
mm,
And I think that that's interesting. I think that tattoos have a way of grounding people. They can
yeah,
almost point to the day or the month or the time in their life when that particular tattoo struck them as being a point of inspiration.
yeah, yeah. That
And
makes sense because I think if you think about the historical nature of tattoos, the tribal element and all that kind of thing. It's like a
yeah, well, I mean, when the only people who used to get tattoos were like sailors,
mm,
because you once you crossed the Atlantic Ocean on a ship, you got an anchor tattoo, and it's like,
yeah,
okay, there you go. That
yeah,
dude crossed the Atlantic Ocean in a ship. He's got all of his life in a rucksack. So the thing that he uses to commemorate that is an anchor on his arm.
mm,
Uh, you know,
yeah. I mean, I'm thinking also of like Pacific Islanders, Maoris in particular, and those kind of
yeah,
tattoos and what they signify in that culture. And even like Russian mob guys. I don't know if you've ever seen that film Eastern Promises, but
yeah, it's a great
yeah,
movie.
it's the tattoos are basically the life story. They're like the resume of these guys. You show your
Yeah.
this is what you've done. This is where you work. This is who you work for. Um, so yeah, it's I don't know how we got onto tattoos, but that's you know.
Well, the other thing that I thought was interesting is in this case, the desert, particularly the Southwest American desert,
Mm,
as sort of a literary space,
mm.
I thought was interesting because of the book McTeague. And I don't know if you've ever read McTeague by Frank Norris.
No, no, I saw you mention that. Um, no, I kept thinking, for some reason, I kept thinking it was Frank McCourt. But anyway, no,
No,
no, I've
no,
never
no.
read it.
It's basically a Gilded Age author based out of San Francisco, but he was part of the American elite, and it
Mm,
was written sort of at a time of social Darwinism,
mm,
where basically Norris in this book was looking at the working class in San Francisco and judging them very harshly.
mm,
And McTeague ends with a desert scene, ends in the desert.
mm,
And so I thought a lot about McTeague, but I, at the same time, knowing John and having read the book, John's critique of these characters or presentation of these characters seems to come from a position of age rather than class. You know,
yeah,
it's written by a
he's
person who grew up
who
rather
grew out of
than,
it. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, he was one of those guys. I mean, that's the impression I get. That
yeah,
he was writing about not, if not himself, then people that he knew. And like you said, this is a book about, well, people. You know, I was going to say guys in their 20s, but
yeah,
it's like people in their 20s in this particular moment in time. So the early
yes,
2000s, early to mid 2000s. Um, and part of it, because we're about the same age,
yeah,
and what I was saying before about when I was initially reading this book, just thinking, oh my god, these these characters are just vapid and shallow. And part of that was, you know, but I was still reading because
yeah,
it's a great book. But part of that, I think, was just, you know, me kind of in conversation with my 20-something-year-old self, just, you know, like, trying, you know, grab the old me by the neck and just shake him around. Just look, get it together, tighten up. You know,
oh yeah, yeah, no, no, no,
and there's
that's,
probably an element of that in the way that he wrote the book, because he sort of does it, and you get more of a sense of it towards the end, where he really
mhm.
does that hopscotching and manipulation of time really well, and you get the sense of, yeah, this is a guy looking back, um, you know, at his younger self, because the book is told in the first person,
Mhm.
um, and yeah, it's yeah, it's. I'm not sure where I was going with this, but it's
I
it's
mean,
it's it's fantastic.
it's celebratory until it's not.
Yes, yeah,
You know,
yeah. I mean, he
like
writes about them, and he sort of shows it warts and all, but there is a kind of affinity that he has for these characters and all their flaws, I suppose.
yeah, yeah. Until it all comes crashing in.
Yeah, and
Um,
it really does. Like
and it really does.
I was shocked, because I thought, you reading this book, and one thing I was reminded of, maybe Amazon recommended, because when you pick up one book, it says, hey, if you read this, you like that. And one author that it threw up was Michel Houellebecq. I don't know if you know him. He's a
No,
French.
I don't.
He's he's reasonably well known, in at least in sort of English speaking Europe and outside. I mean, he's very popular in France. He's like the enfant terrible of French literature. A lot of sex and just a lot of, he's a bit of a nasty character. He's a bit like, Celine or someone like that from the 1930s. He's that sort of, French tradition of, just an obnoxious but talented writer. Um, and, it's a lot of just craven sex and just sort of just horribleness. And I was just like, no, 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 no. Like, I can see, okay, because there's a bit of sort of sex, and there's an element of that in Duffy's book, but it's not the same.
Yeah,
But
but they don't steal, right? That's the other thing. You sort of see these characters are kind of reckless and they sell drugs
hmm,
and they do drugs and they're sort of, but they're not, they're only malignant to each other,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
I
They're
think is
not sort of
interesting.
knocking grannies over or anything like that. That would be mean.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's interesting. It's interesting that it's within that, because if it wasn't, it'd be, more like a crime book.
Yeah,
Instead, it feels like a tale of friends in tragedy,
yeah,
rather
yeah.
than a tale of criminality. You almost just don't, you think more about what the characters are doing to each other than
Mm.
how they're affecting the world around them.
Oh, it's very insular in that way. Like it's just this
Yeah,
microcosm, which is like their own little universe.
yeah,
I think you're right because it reads as just a book where you're just following these characters and their lives, and it's only really as you get into the second half of it where everything starts to come together or fall apart depending on your perspective.
yeah,
And it moves like a crime thriller because I was just, oh, what happens next? What happens next?
yeah,
And there's elements of, I guess you'd call it, crime fiction in that, you know, or plotted fiction. I guess there are crimes that go on, um, but it really earns that in terms of the way he set up the characters, and you're just that invested. So when it all just starts to go really bad for them,
yeah,
you're just absolutely sucked in by that point. But I think even when in the first half of the book, where you're just reading about these characters and their kind of shallow existence, drug and alcohol fueled, there are things going on, like that character, the prospector. I don't know if you remember him from the bar, the
yeah.
guy who
He's
would
sort
sort of
of
wander
a
off into the mountains and
Yeah, he's a
look for treasure.
philosopher. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And then the uncle of his girlfriend, Abraham or not Abraham. Neither of us can remember whether.
yeah.
I
I
got a
don't
feel.
remember his
I got
name.
a feeling it is Abraham, but maybe you sort of incepted that name into my head. But
No, it might have been my fault. He had a very specific name, and now I feel bad that I didn't look it up, um,
not
particularly.
Ezekiel, is it?
But no, it's not Ezekiel. It's biblical. It's biblical, and
Yeah.
John makes a point out of pointing out that he's like this Jewish person who is very sort of paternalistic and
Mm,
very caring and very cognizant and receiving. And I mean, it's possible that it's supposed to be Jesus. I don't know, but it
mm,
struck me that a character who was mostly defined by her face being burned from a tragedy during childhood would
mm,
have this very specific Jewish uncle who lives in the
yeah.
mountains around town.
Mm.
And so I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna probably have to go ask John. He's
Well,
fortunately,
yeah,
John,
yeah.
unlike other authors, is still alive, so we can ask
Mm,
him. But
yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
it struck me as sort of important.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the epigraph. I think there might be two epigraphs. I think, and they're both from Ecclesiastes. So he's obviously familiar with the concept of religion.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I hadn't put that together myself. But I remember that uncle character. I mean, that's another turning point in the book because with Riley, you get the sense that he's just kind of along for the ride, doesn't really know what he's doing. Um, but then there are these slivers of, the prospectors one, these characters that come in and kind of just show, there's a world outside of the one that you're existing in at the moment.
yeah,
And um, he has the opportunity to pursue those other avenues. He doesn't.
yeah,
And yeah, and things happen the way that they happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So you and I have talked about Alex Perez
Yeah,
from he's the literary editor over at Real Clear Politics. He
yeah.
also is a columnist with Tablet Magazine
He's an internet
and
comedian as well.
an internet comedian who I think is funny. You know, Thomas doesn't like him,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know him, but I'm just.
but
I think
he's
he's a provocateur, which
he is a provocateur.
which I actually do find that kind of stuff funny, but I don't, like most, if not everything on the internet, I don't take any of
well,
it that seriously.
one of the things he's said, and he's been he's critical of the fact that particularly millennial authors are sort of, I would say, we just don't seem to be going anywhere in the
Hmm.
literary zeitgeist. That, as articles have pointed out, there has never been a straight male millennial author published in the New Yorker. I pointed out that the reason that straight male millennial authors aren't in the New Yorker is because they figured out very early that they could independently publish their stuff and do whatever they wanted,
Yeah.
and had the straight male authors of the past been able to do that, they would have. I'm almost certain that they would have gone and done, their own thing. But the other side of that is that this John is a straight male millennial author
Yeah.
who has written a work of literary fiction. And it is, in my opinion, a working class work of literary fiction.
Oh, very
Fiction.
much so. Yeah.
It is not its focus is on John's experience or resulting from John's experience when he was in his 20s.
Mm.
And I'm not, John has subsequently gone on to get a master's, or not a master's degree. He's gone on to be a journalist and done a lot of cool things, very independent minded things.
Yeah.
And, um, and he went to film school. And I think that we found what Perez has been supposedly saying,
Doesn't exist.
is
Yeah.
doesn't exist or is missing. And as anticipated, it's an independent book that that John Duffy wrote and produced
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think the question is, do you think that if John had tried to engage with literary agents and with mainstream publishing, that Where When It Rains, a book that you and I both really love, and a book
Yeah.
that's someone else I know also really liked, and we're all, millennial 40s dads,
Mm.
found to be beautifully written, well plotted, well paced, uh, uh, not never lacking for depth, a very insightful observation about a particular period of time. Do you think that John could have ever passed this through a major publisher, circa, similar to, for example, Sally Rooney, who tackles
Mm.
issues like this and others? Do you think that would have ever happened?
I'm glad you asked this. I'm just licking my chops because I've got a lot to say on this. I mean, I emailed John after I spoke to you about the book and just said, "Hey, I loved it." And I think we had a bit of a back foot. I think he said that he had tried to, done the usual thing, tried to send it to agents, and they didn't pick it up for whatever reason. But I mean, let's not pretend that everything that's got literary merit gets published to acclaim.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
because there's this is not a new thing where, authors are, for whatever reason, just ignored. And, Confederacy of Dancers is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
You just look at
Yeah.
it and think, how did people pass this up? And and similarly to that, when I read the John Duffy book, and his first book is really good as well. I read that soon after, and I mean, this guy can write as good as any of your favorite New York Times literary novelists, then, now, whenever. Like, he's that good, I think. And you can read the opening pages. I mean, I don't know how these agents work. I don't know how these publishers work in this sense. Like, because you read it and you think, this is top quality writing. I mean, the guy knows how to open a chapter. Sentence for sentence, he's writing as good as anyone can write. I mean, I think I can write pretty well, and I think I'm not trying to be obnoxious. I think I can write as good as pretty much any author that's out there. But there's a handful of guys and girls or women that write, and I think, oh no, I could never do that. They're better than me, and he's one of them. I've got to be honest. Like, some of the stuff he comes, and I say that to say, how the fuck did this not get picked up by an agent or a publisher? And it must be the subject matter, because I think you could, on a very surface level, start to read it and just think, oh, this is a story of some, white guy in his 20s getting drunk, promiscuous sex, blah, blah, blah. We've seen it all before. And that's not really where the culture is at the moment. And, I have, it's a tricky one, because it's, this whole thing that, people aren't writing books for men anymore. And,
I don't necessarily.
It's hard for me to
well,
it's hard for me to drum up a load of sympathy for straight white men in the world in that sense. But there's books for everyone. I mean, okay, sure, this whole thing about publishing's gone skewed towards women. It's run by women, and I hate the word woke in the sense that it's used now. I mean, but I know what people are talking about. But woke, for me, has a very specific meaning that's been hijacked just to mean things that people don't like. But say, this performative representation, which I think in a lot of ways is like very patronizing, in the terms of it's still, white mainstream people that are putting, this is the Asian voice that I want to hear. This is the black voice that I want to hear. It's, I think there's a roundabout way of saying that if you really want these things to change, you have to have women or Asian people or black people making those decisions at publishing houses or as agents, rather than and Perez always just talks about white women and their tote bags and all that stuff, and it's kind of funny. And I know exactly who he's talking about, and there's an element of truth to it, which is why it's funny. And the idea that they're the ones deciding, this is a sort of idea of the minority voice that we want to see. I mean, yeah, there's definitely an element of that going on, but I think, say that to say, well, it's a shame if, and I don't know if this is true. I think what Duffy's done with Picket Fire looks amazing. And this book that he's got coming out in October, looks incredible. He seems to do a really good job with I know he does a good job with the covers. He takes a lot of care with the actual physical presentation of the books as well. So, it's mainstream publishing. It's their loss, quite frankly, because, these books are, I'd say this book in particular, Where When It Rains, is definitely the best book I've read in the last 12 months, maybe longer. So,
yeah, it's exceptional. And to me, the thing that really stands out about it is something that I have a big that frustrates me about the books that I read, particularly books that are told from male viewpoints, which is that the male interiority in contemporary books seems manufactured to please other people who aren't men. That the men or the men's voice is put through a lens that sounds inauthentic to me.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's interesting, and I bring it up for this reason. And I don't know if I brought it up on the podcast. I probably have. When Portnoy's complaint came out, and those who know what Portnoy's complaint is, it's basically about a man having conversations with his therapist about his own
He
personal
jacks off a
issues.
lot, basically.
He jacks off a lot in it. That was the best selling book
Mm.
the year it came out. It
Yeah.
was the best selling book. It is without question, would never under any circumstance be published today. It
Yeah,
would
but I
be
think,
it would be
yeah,
treated as misogynistic, or there would be issues with the male gaze, or the author's a cretin sort of stuff. And I read sort of these other I'm reading other books where the male characters are sort of presented as kind of putting on a front, that everything they do or every reaction they have is kind of indicative of some inner insecurity, instead of, for example, the just natural impulse to lead or to act or to feel a way about something or to feel disgust or attraction. And that's what I think stands out about this book. That's is that the Riley character is rather unadulterated in his
mm,
um in his perception and action of the world around him. And if he's um, upset or self-conscious about his decisions, it always comes later, right?
mm. Yeah, because
Uh,
you read parts of it and he's sort of having this conversation with himself where he's like, I know I'm fucking up. I know I'm doing the wrong thing. But and again, it's almost like he's looking back at his younger self when he's doing
yeah,
this. Although simultaneously it's in the moment, which
yeah,
is one of the magic tricks of the book. Um, and again, I was reading it's like, dude, like, just stop fucking up. Like, it's clear, it's clear what the smart thing to do is. And I was in my 20s as well, and I didn't always make the best decisions. So fine.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, he is a very complicated character in that way, because he's not just a boorish imbecile or horrible misogynist or anything like that. He's just a complicated guy who fucks up and
yeah,
has moments of good, moments of bad. Makes terrible decisions sometimes, but he's a good friend, and sometimes he's not a good friend. And yeah, he's complicated in that sense. I mean, in terms of the Portnoy's complaint of it all, um, you said it was the best-selling book of what, 1916, late 60s, I think it was.
1970.
Okay.
I think
I
1970.
mean, I mean that's the thing that, and to go back to Perez and these guys saying, oh well, these books will never get published today, and isn't Raymond Carver just a genius and blah blah blah. Fine, but
The Ray Carver
fine,
sauce.
but the world moves on, and okay, maybe Portnoy's complaint wouldn't get picked up today because that's not where the world's at. Like, things are a product of their time, and things are
Yeah,
successful in the time that they are because that's the time that it is. And you can say, well, I hate Sally Rooney. I've never read Sally Rooney, but I'm just saying,
I've never
You know,
read Sally Rooney
you
either.
know, and I think, and we've talked about this before, like this whole, again, I don't want to use the word woke, but this sort of performative kind of thing that you see, not just in publishing, but everywhere, where, and I think it's these things that start out with very good intentions and they just get hijacked and it becomes like this, box ticking thing where, we've got to publish lots of women, lots of, you know, authors from this minority and that minority and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think once that tail starts wagging the dog rather than the quality of the writing, because I think, and I always joke about this, like, oh, they just want to publish, an author who's like a transgendered Iraqi with one leg and suffers from Tourette's or whatever. Fine. You know what? The next Cormac McCarthy, it might be like a one-legged transgendered Eskimo or whatever. And it wouldn't kill some of these guys to read a book by, an Iraqi lesbian, or God forbid, just a black woman or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that the point of literature is to get under the skin of other people and experience the world through other people's eyes. So I don't see a problem with that. The only thing that bothers me is that once, you start, how would I put this? Just going looking for books to meet that criteria rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Because I think that, that kind of, we publish loads of women and we publish, people from minority XYZ. Great. But sometimes it comes off as very patronizing. And that's not really what people from, black authors or Chinese authors or female authors or whatever, that's not what they want.
No.
They don't want to be someone sort of diversity box ticking exercise or, some kind of sympathy thing. They just want, the chance, to be treated equally. So I think, that's the main thing. If it's good, it's good. Who cares who wrote it in that sense? So yeah, I think, again, when people start complaining about, oh, it's so tough to be, a straight white male, it's like, no, it isn't. But
well, I think this is what I would say is that my concern is that the John Duffys are getting left on the cutting room floor because
oh yeah,
you know what I
I
mean,
get
like
that. I absolutely get that.
but I think it goes beyond simply an identity question. I think it goes to that the people who are reading the books are reading sort of John Duffy's narrative and John Duffy's perspective, or protagonist in his perspective, and they're saying, oh, who would want to read this, a dude who's a skateboarder and he's
Mm,
got, dizziness and he's out there, having all these misadventures and, if I was finding more of that in my search, right, as I'm reading books, I would say, oh, well, the John Duffy, or the narrative that I find interesting, or the narrative that that I found so attractive in this book, if I was finding that elsewhere, I could say, oh, well, that's still being expressed. This idea of the
mm,
millennial and the working class contemporary malaise is
yeah.
showing through, but I don't seem to find it. Like, I'm not finding it in the books that I read. So that's what I think is interesting about it. Ultimately, that a white male author wrote it is
Mm,
inconsequential as
yeah.
long
No,
as it
exactly.
seems
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah.
So to me, it's about sort of authenticity, and so this is a very authentic book to me.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I said at the beginning, like the my initial impression of this book, I thought, doesn't really sound like my thing. Like these aimless 20-somethings just bumming around, getting drunk, whatever.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, well, because I heard him on the podcast, and once I started reading it out of curiosity, I was just hooked in pretty much straight away.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that speaks to you know the power of a good book or a good novel is that it doesn't matter what it's about. I mean, and actually something that I did think of, because this book is tangentially about skateboarding, at least at first. One of my favorite documentaries of all time, I don't know if you've seen it, is Dogtown and Z-Boys,
Yeah.
about the birth of modern skateboarding culture. Not Tony Hawk, not blanking on Stacy
Well,
Peralta, and all those guys. Tony Allen. And I don't know anything about skateboarding. Like I tried skateboarding a couple of times when I was a kid, almost got ran over and just quickly fell out of love with it straight away. But the subject matter itself is almost immaterial if the documentary is good, because you buy into what it's actually about. It could be about rice farmers in Southeast Asia. It could be about skateboarders in Venice Beach, California. It doesn't matter, because you buy into the narrative and the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think we're talking about Duffy's book as, oh, it's this book for men, millennial men. I don't think there's nothing to stop a woman from reading this and enjoying it if the woman is into well-written, complex characters. At all. And I think a lot of women would enjoy it. I mean, they'd recognize a lot of they'd recognize
a lot of
in their time. Yeah.
They'd recognize a lot of coworkers and ex-boyfriends. Hopefully no husbands.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of the sort of maleness of it, but the female characters in it are very well drawn as well. Like Ashley, obviously, she's kind of this vapid character, but for what she is, it's totally believable.
Well, she's a traditional priestess of the the cult of commercialism and of fame and of all those things that the other girl with the burns on her face and the biblical monotheistic uncle in the hills isn't. She's
there's the other character who's his friend, the one he's always rolling cigarettes for.
Yeah,
her name as well. But so I mean, there are richly drawn female characters as well. Because I think, I think for books that are aimed at men, I think they need to have strongly drawn female characters as well. Like, not in that sort of Bechdel test kind of way, because if a story, it depends on the story. If it's a story about a sniper going through the jungle, okay, you can't just throw two women characters in there having a conversation that's not around the man or whatever, whatever that Bechdel test is. But there's nothing, I don't think this whole thing about men just read books about men, purely about men doing men stuff, is just total nonsense. But yeah, I think, the thing with Duffy's book is, I hear what you're saying, that given the subject matter and the characters, it's probably a style of book or type of story that has fallen out of fashion for whatever reason, which is a shame, because it's a beautifully written book. It's really, I mean, you talk about it as if it's like this ornate object. I mean, it's also just a really fucking good read. So I mean, it is, I hear what you're saying, that these kind of books just aren't in the mainstream anymore. But like I said, that's not really where we're at as a culture. I mean, there's not really, there's no Norman Mailer type characters walking around. I don't know whether there should be, but I mean, there's not even, I think about someone like Paul Auster who died pretty recently. I mean, would you consider him like a dad lit author?
No, not really. I think
No.
Tom Wolfe would be the
Mm,
most recent sort of literary dadlet. Is Tom Wolfe is definitely dadlit. Uh, you know,
oh yeah, but I mean that's like real boomer shit. I mean like something more modern.
well, that's what I'm trying to do is find a modern dadlit author.
Mm,
That's what the search is for. I mean, I think the most recent literary dadlit authors are probably Carl Hyacin and Elmore Leonard.
yeah,
But then again,
yeah.
that's still
They're
boomers,
doing very
right?
yeah, but I mean they're doing a very specific crime fiction thing as
Yeah,
well. Okay, I mean people will sort of argue
yeah,
about the literary merit and rightly
yeah.
so of an Elmore Leonard, but
Well, Don
Carl
DeLillo.
Hyacin,
Why
yeah,
don't we use Don DeLillo as an example? Don DeLillo is also a dad lit author.
yeah.
Um, you know, I don't know who dads get excited about these days, other than obviously Thomas Trang. Uh, so when's the next Thomas Trang coming?
Yeah, this is all the
Yes,
dads
the
down at the
dads,
garage.
all the
That's what
dads.
they're talking about
Yeah, that
at the gym.
yes, the
Yeah,
dads at the gym. Did you read the most recent Thomas Trang?
yeah, yeah. They're like, well, he's no John Duffy, but yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
good.
it's
Yeah,
John Duffy. So yeah, I mean, this is what I'll say. I think you and I can both agree. Dads, go out, get a copy of
oh yeah, yeah,
Where When
without
It
fail.
Rains. Where When
Yeah,
It Rains. It is not a particularly long book.
no.
It has something for everybody. It's got some biblical allegory. It's got some action. It's got some crime. It's got some sex. Some
What more do you need?
what
I
do
mean,
we, yeah, I mean that's
the way we talked about it,
yes.
my fear is that someone is listening and thinking, oh, but it sounds like James Joyce or whatever. It's like, no, no, it's not. It's like
Yeah.
you don't need a PhD in whatever to read it. It's it's beautifully written, it's smartly written, but it's still very accessible.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, some of it is not overwritten, but it is very like literary in that sense that this
Yeah.
is not like a chummy kind of guy sitting next to you in the bar type of voice. It is sort of that elevated register,
Yeah.
which I don't know. Some readers don't like, struggle with, but I don't think it's like it's off-putting to like say a general guy, dad or whoever that just reads Elmore Leonard. I think they can manage it, and it's
Yeah.
definitely worth your time.
Well, Thomas, thank you. I know it's late in
Yeah, it is. I think it's
England.
just started raining here as well.
Well, I mean, you live in London, so
Well, yeah, but it's we've had a bit of a heat wave here. I think it's happening all
oh,
over the
okay.
northern hemisphere. So yeah, a bit of rain actually be good now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me for this book club edition and go out and get a copy of Dark Neon and Dirt
Yeah, yeah, and where when it rains too. So,
and Where When It Rains.
yeah,
And join the conversation on Twitter.
yeah.
Thank you very much. This has
No,
been the
thanks for having me.
Dadlet
This is
Pod.
good fun. Yeah.
Our time together has come to an end. It's time to return to your wife, kids, and friends. It's time to pick up those books you forgot while you wait for the next Dadlit Pod.